What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Vince Rashad. I'm here to talk about Birth of a this. This is the second part of my Birth of a Nation review. Okay, this is what else I got out of the movie on a deeper level. Nate Parker was somewhat stuck in a rock, somewhere in a rock. A pimp in a hard place. A rock in a hard place. He could have went completely independent, and he would have made just a little bit more than he spent on the movie, or he could have sold out the movie for almost 30 million and some guarantees, and made him a grip and just Fox Searchlight do whatever. But I think they literally paid to sabotage the movie's money intakes. That's what I think they paid to do. I think the DVDs are gonna do well, but I think the DVDs are going to do well, but I think, the movie sales themselves are going to be relatively low, around about the 15, 20 some $1 million range in US sales. And, another thing you got to include is the sales in Europe and Australia and Canada. Well, it's not going to sell too well in Australia. I can guarantee you that. But Europe and Canada. But also it's going to get some sales in South America too. But a big thing that I got out of this movie was that Nate Parker wanted to tell, a deeper aspect of the rebellion in Nat Turner's life. You see, he had a way of, telling the story in which he didn't make black people look like coons, buffoons, and idiots. The movie showed and gave, credence to our suffering back then. But the key aspect of it is that it had to show, this very hard part to look at of him being a preacher and standing up there, and having to lecture to these people lessons of inferiority. It was just sad to look at, and it showed that Nate Parker knew very well what it had to be like to be a preacher back then and have to stand up. There are specific verses of the Bible. I know in Ephesians, I don't know the exact letter, number, verse, but in the book of Ephesians, it okays slavery. It just speaks towards slaves as if, you keep doing your duty, and it doesn't, rain any, guilt or shame upon people who enslave them. It just instructs slaves to keep being happy and to obey their masters, but that's not the verse that he had Nat Turner as a preacher standing up preaching about. It was some verse from 2 Peter. But he had to stand up in front of beat down people. There was no organ, there was no guitar, there was no drum. As a literate slave, he had to learn to stand up in front of people and just give them this white Jesus gospel. Teach them that they were inferior. He was so good. And see, what it brings to mind is this documentary. Don't even ask me to remember the name of this documentary. It's a documentary that I looked at years ago on the Australian people. And in the documentary, there's literally a monument that sits in the Australian desert that says, here is the spot, or here lies the spot where Chief such and such, and it has his Aboriginal tribe name, killed a white man, and it has the name of the white man, the white sheriff or the white judge right there beneath it. But I think it was a white sheriff. Australian, outbacksman, got his ass killed by one of our Aborigine people out there. And this was way back in the 1800s. And basically, they remember stuff. And Nat Turner was in the same position because part of the reason why that killing of the white man in Australia was so significant back in the 1800s is because it represented a revolt of a black man who had been put in charge of a whole bunch of other black people. And he sided with his people, and his revolt against the white Australians pretty much began with him killing that white man. And see, this story it kind of melts in the relationship between Nat Turner and his owner. They had a close relationship. And it also shows that Nat Turner was good enough at doing what he did, preaching, convincing black people to be slaves. The movie is very yin yang. You know, at first he's doing his job, but then he's starting to see the suffering of his people, you know. And it just really makes you feel how difficult it must have been for him to stand up there and teach that, you know, white Jesus is God and that you are to be a subservient slave. And he couldn't look, you know, it showed this real emasculating part of him not being able to look into white people's eyes and, you know, bow down to some of the most nasty, stinking ass white boys just because they got the gun and the military on their side. As a matter of fact, that's who shot up the slave revolt. The U.S. military came in and put it down. Because, see, the slaves up in that part of Virginia, Hampton County, they were much more rebellious because of the parts of Africa that they come from, but they were also regionally close to the Mason-Dixon line where they didn't have to go extremely far to be free. So it was hard to keep niggas in that area, you know. Brothers want to leave, you know. But it shows the part where he turns, you know. He all of a sudden starts roaring at these, you know, brothers, you know, and there's this brutality. I mean, there's this scene where this one brother is refusing to eat, him and his other brother, and this white boy just sits there with his Neanderthal ass and just casually beats. He just casually chips this brother's teeth out, sticks a funnel down his throat, and just pours the food down his throat, and the brother still spits it up. But, you know, it don't matter. You just had all your teeth knocked out. Chiseled out with a hammer and a chisel. You know, they had them tied to the ground and they knocked their teeth out with a hammer and a chisel. Well, not tied to the ground, but tied to a structure, you know. It was real gut-wrenching to look at. You know, it just made you want to bust some white folks in the head just looking at it. But, you know, it was a good movie. And, you know, part of the reason I'm showing this picture right here is to show that Martin Luther King fought for the rights of women and girls to be educated. So, you know, the very education that we've got being thrown up in our face nowadays, you know, you just remember, black woman, that we helped you fight to get that. You know, there's a black boy there, black girl, dude back there holding a little black girl. Black man with a little black girl, you can't hardly see her. But, you know, black woman way in the background there, you see her? You know, but, you know, this movie, Birth of a Nation, it emphasized a lot of stuff, you know. I like the part at the end of the movie that was close to the rebellion. See, the movie, I'll say, is about 85% slavery and about 15% rebellion. I will say that, but I will say this also. The movie has way more killing in it than I thought. You know, a lot of people didn't give it credit for the killing that it had in there. You know, they had the killing of some crackers because he ended up having to kill his owner because, see, something that wasn't talked about is how, you know, we are owed reparations because, see, the slaves were getting so rebellious that his owner's plantation was, you know, a big rich plantation, but it wasn't making enough money. So Nat Turner used to go to these other plantations and preach to these slaves to calm them down, you know, to stop them from, you know, being hard-headed and revolting and resisting, you know. He got them in the set of mind to be slaves, but, you know, after a certain amount of time, he started preaching a message of rebellion where the interpretation of the Bible became, you know, radical, kind of like the Rastafari or the Maroon or the Hebrew Israelites, you know. But it became more radical, you know, and they, you know, began revolting and looking at themselves as the oppressed people. And he began, you know, laying down the fire, so to speak, toward the oppressors. Is funny because the first sermon that Nat Turner gives at this plantation is basically a resistance sermon after he has to look at this man get his teeth chiseled out with a nail and a chisel. I mean, a hammer and a chisel, you know, and, the people were just spoken of casually, you know, as cattle, you know, subhumans. And, the man was like, the drought has really been hurting us this year, so we had to reduce their meals to one meal a day. So the slaves were hungry and just beat down. But it was a good movie. I liked the revolt part. It was very similar to the part in the movie Braveheart and the part of the movie 300 where they fought the Persians, and in Braveheart where the guys beat the British or the French so bad, the Scottish, that they were like, retreat, after sitting there and thinking they were just going to run over the Scottish peasants. But it was a good movie. The movie was a treat. I give it an 8 out of 5. I took the 1.5 points away for a little bit of pandering to white people, doing these very overly long, just slave reenactments, and this balancing act that he had to do where white people would see themselves as, the big brutes who beat down the little peasant. Black people, there's a little pandering to that aspect of it. And there's the wanting of Nate Parker to be approved and to receive glamorous praise by white people. But at the same time, I will say that brother is for his people. That's been the Birth of a Nation review. It's your boy Vince Rashad. I hope you enjoy it. Go see it. Get it on DVD when it comes. It'll be a good Christmas gift. Very good Christmas gift. It'll be worth the $20, 20 or so bucks. You got that. You waste that on a bunch of junk. You might as well support the movie. You got to add that movie to your collection of movies. You just have to. You had to have that. You got to add that movie. You got to cop that flick when it come on DVD. You got to cop that flick. And I say one more time before I go, shame on you, black woman, for writing any negative article or in any shape or way being in glee over this movie only doing okay its first week out. But because this man absolutely loves his black woman. 2 of his children are by black women. His 2 oldest children are 2 black girls, I think, or either a boy and a girl. But shout out to Nate Parker, man. Big things to come in the future for Nate Parker. Birth of a Nation Review Part 2. I'm out.